This is my brutally honest review of The Sims 4 base game. Now, you're probably thinking, Satch, why are you doing a review of The Sims 4 base game? This was released in 2014. Well, The Sims 4 has been alive, well, barely alive, for the last 9 years. As such, the game has received so many updates to the base game, it feels like a totally different experience than it was upon launch. On launch, it was a controversial disaster. I mean, it still is a bit of a controversial disaster, but they've made a lot of effort to try and make it feel like a much better game. And I haven't really seen any reviews of the Sims 4 base game out there that have actually covered all these changes. So I thought it would be only fair to actually do a review of the Sims 4 base game based on all of these updates. Obviously, the Sims 4 has 3 modes: create a sim mode where you create your characters, build mode where you build the house that they live in, and then you've got the live mode. Create a sim mode in the Sims 4 is actually really good. Definitely not the best character creator I've seen in my entire life, but it's very intuitive with the ability to click and drag anything, as well as tons of presets. Over the years, the game has had a lot of free clothing updates. When the game first came out, all of the outfits were horrendous. Luckily, we have some free extra outfits which aren't as horrendous. I'd say like about still 80% of cast in The Sims 4 is pretty bad though. I kind of feel like this was done deliberately to entice you to buy packs. I don't know how you feel about that. Men's clothing, I'd say, is particularly bad. Enjoy dressing your male Sims as fun dads, as that's the only look that you get out of the base game. Kids, toddlers, and infants all actually get a lot of quite good stuff, I think. Toddlers do look a little bit weird, especially the hair meshes. But for the most part, I honestly think the base game is enough for kids stuff. I don't feel like you need any packs to add to that, which is maybe an unpopular opinion, but true for me. The Sims 4 is a very diverse game with tons of customization options. I feel like you can reasonably create any kind of person using the base game alone. You definitely can't make like really pretty Sims, and it does almost feel impossible to find anything that doesn't look like a little bit strange. I feel like you can kind of tell the clothes were made by people who are good at designing meshes in games, but not good at fashion, if that makes sense. Although I do give it a lot of credit for actually being diverse. In Create Sim mode, you can choose up to 3 personality traits. Definitely not enough in my opinion. The traits that you do choose don't really have much of an impact on gameplay either, to be honest. For example, if you select a sim to have a good trait and they do good things, it puts them in a happy mood. But if you give your sim the evil trait and you make them do bad things, it also puts them in a happy mood. Both sims are happy whether they're good or bad, and happiness has the exact same gameplay consequences, so there's not really that much like depth to any Sims 4 traits in my opinion. It's a little bit of a dead feature. I do think Sims 4 Sims have no personality. Building in The Sims 4 is very, very easy. In previous Sims games, building was almost like a very niche thing that a small amount of people did, but most didn't bother. In The Sims 4, it's really accessible to everyone. With a bit of practice, you can make a lot of different kinds of builds. The base game actually comes with a huge amount of stuff to build with too. So I own every single Sims 4 pack, so almost all of my builds are a total mess of all different things from different packs. But most of the fundamental stuff I use in almost every single build is like a base game object, because the base game is very versatile. As with Create a Sim mode, the build mode has been updated over the years with additions such as a pool tool, platforms, curved walls, as well as many new objects to decorate with. The base game is kind of split into 2 main styles, like a Louisiana American style and a desert style. That is an awful way to word it. I hope you know what I mean. But there are many different things and many different styles, although it does kind of feel like a jack of all trades approach, because there's a lot of different things from a variety of styles in the base game, but not enough to create an entire coherent build. Although I feel like Sims 4 base game build mode itself is superb. Even if you don't own any of the packs, it's still very, very fun. The Sims 4 has 3 worlds in the base game. Willow Creek is the main world that you're all going to live in. The vanilla American suburban neighborhood, so you can live out your basic bitch white picket fence fantasy lifestyle. Yes, I'm calling you out because you know it's true. There's Oasis Springs, which is like a big desert world, basically. I'd say it's a little bit more modern. And then we've got New Crest. Now, New Crest was added as an update after many players complained that there weren't enough lots in Willow Creek and Oasis Springs. They complained that the worlds were really tiny, especially compared to The Sims 3's huge open worlds, and the fact that you could even create your own world in The Sims 3. So New Crest was added to overcompensate for that, although it comes with no lots. It's totally empty, and none of us can be bothered to build lots for every single lot in this world, so it's pretty much just like dead space. It's a paperweight world, basically. Now, the problem with all of The Sims 4 worlds is like this closed world closed neighborhood system. It's not open world like The Sims 3. So if you want to travel between lots, you must go through a loading screen. Before you go into the loading screen, you actually have to wait for the loading screen to load. Then after the loading screen, you also like load into the world after it's loaded. It's like a 3-stage loading process. You do have access to like the general small neighborhood area around you, although there's nothing going on because it's like a closed world system. So there's no incentive really to like explore the world around you, and there's not really anything to do. There's a lot of set dressing in the Sims 4 worlds that you can look at but you can't touch. I will say most of the base game lots are extremely ugly. A major issue is that the base game lots haven't been updated over time despite the game receiving so many updates. Pools were added as an update later on. As a result, none of the base game builds have pools because they haven't updated any of the lots with them. The same could be said for platforms, terrain tools, curved walls, as well as many other things. I don't really understand why EA haven't updated the worlds over time to reflect these updates, to make them actually like usable and enjoyable by players, but they just don't. There's also an issue with households. For example, almost none of the households have children or teens for literally no reason. Toddlers and infants were not in the base game upon release. They were updates, so none of the base game households have any toddlers or infants either. They have updated a couple of households over time with newer appearances, and the Sims team said they do this for every single base game household, but they've only done 2 so far, and it's been 2 years, so I think we can categorically say it's an abandoned project that they've forgotten about because they couldn't be bothered to do it. The households that do exist have basically no storylines, no lore, they have no lives to live. They are all a part of the set dressing. Most of them don't even know each other, including people who should know each other. For example, in Oasis Springs, there's a land grab family, which is a very rich family. Now, the son of that household moved out to live by himself, but EA forgot to add him to the family tree. So even though technically he's the son of the land grab household, technically, like, he could get romantic and flirt with his own mother because they're not related in the code of the game because they forgot to do it and they haven't updated it over the 9 years that this game has been out. So incest is canon in the Sims 4 universe. Again, I feel like they should just update the base game households to make them actually feel alive and give you incentive to play with them. I don't know if it's laziness, I don't know if it's poor business structure, but it gives off a bad impression of the game, it really does. So if you're new to The Sims 4, there are 3 different tutorial systems. Ironically, it's a little bit scattered and confusing. You almost need a tutorial to know which tutorial to use. The actual basics of playing the game is very simple. It's just, you know, resolving their needs, getting a job, simulating basic aspects of life. I've done a couple videos in the past actually where I've uninstalled every single pack and I've tested whether or not the base game is fun without any packs installed. I found that the base game is definitely fun to mess around with. I feel like you can simulate almost every single aspect of life you want to in a very basic, limited capacity, but it doesn't go to any aspect of life in any kind of depth, and you do need a couple of packs to enjoy the game fully. But the base game itself, it allows you to get a job, even though it's a rabbit hole career, meaning you don't follow them to work. You can live as a family, you can see friends, you can go to a bar. Most things, as I said, you can think of doing, you can do to a very limited capacity. But the major gameplay does come with the packs and you do have to purchase those. The Sims 4 doesn't really have any direction over what you do, and you have a lot of control over what you decide to do, which can be a good thing if you like having total control over everything, but it also can feel like a problem if you have no sense of direction. The game has whims, which are like short-term goals which encourage you to perform certain interactions based off your Sims environment and traits. There's also lifetime aspirations, although these feel more like extended tutorials rather than actual aspirations in life. It's a little bit frustrating to me anyway that The Sims 4 has no direction, because The Sims 2 and The Sims 3 did, and it made it a lot more fun because it felt like you had a little bit more of a path to go down if you're less creative and you don't like playing pretend. The Sims 4 is all about playing pretend and pretending something is there or pretending something's happening when it's not happening. In other words, EA rushed the release of the game and they didn't finish it properly. So it's got rocky foundations, but that's what they market it as. Create your own story. Be who you want to be. Basically, it means that the game is very scattered and it doesn't have a focus. Although one update that came to The Sims 4 over the past couple of years is scenarios. These are kind of like a challenge mode where you follow a set storyline in the game. I really love the idea of scenarios, and a lot of them are a miss because I think they're way too open. Some of the scenarios make you start with like set Sims in a set house household, and it feels like going back to The Sims 2 where you open up a household and they all have storylines and lore. And I really, really miss that. And I think the more linear side of scenarios are a really great challenge in the game. A lot of them are a bit tutorial-y, and some of them are so open that they don't really feel like challenges. But I think there are some great ones in there to break up standard gameplay. Although they have been implemented in a very confusing way, they weren't implemented that well. They've also kind of stopped updating them, so unfortunately they seem like another abandoned feature, but the ones that do exist are good. Many Sims 4 players do this thing where we spend 2 hours in create a sim mode where you make your perfect household. If you're a builder, you might also spend a couple more hours making the perfect home, and then you proceed to spend about 10-20 minutes into the actual like live mode gameplay, and then you turn it off because you're bored and exhausted because everything requires so much like setting up. There's too much like open freedom, you don't know what to do, so you just switch off. And almost every single Sims 4 player does this, whether they admit it or not. The Sims 4 is set up very weirdly. In previous Sims games, you just jump straight into the world and you open any household. There were storylines to follow. There were always things to do. In The Sims 4, you can't do that. You can't jump into the world. Firstly, you actually, like when you create a new game, you literally start in create a sim mode and you have to make a new household, whether you like it or not. You have to choose one of the ugly, horrendous houses, which means you have to build it and redecorate it. And then you have to build everything up from scratch. It's just so exhausting. The game doesn't really give you any incentive to explore the different townies. And the townies themselves, even if it did give you an incentive, there's no storyline or lore or depth behind them. Everything just feels very much fake, like they're all just there as set dressing. The whole game kind of just feels like a setup instance, if you know what I mean. The Sims 4 gameplay is bad. It's not severe. It is playable and it can be enjoyable, but you will be disappointed, I feel, if you've played The Sims 2 and The Sims 3. Objectively, it has a lot less features and a lot less ambition. The Sims 4 is often described as an aesthetic game where you can take cute screenshots and enjoy the vibe, enjoy the look, but not enjoy the gameplay. You know, every Sims game has its own thing. The Sims 1 had chaos and adult humor. The Sims 2 had incredible gameplay and a really advanced social AI system. The Sims 3 had open worlds and unlimited customization. And The Sims 4 is pretty. That's The Sims 4's thing. The Sims 4 has an outstanding build mode, in my opinion. Building is one of the most popular things to do in The Sims 4 right now, especially amongst Sims content creators. Create a sim mode is also very good. Definitely like not the best character creator in the entire world, but for what it is, it's really, really good. And the amount of like mods and custom content that you can get is like endless. So you can really create a wide variety of characters. It's just the live mode, the actual gameplay mode is very mediocre in my opinion. Despite being a management sim, I just feel like it's less about household management and just more about enjoying the vibe or escaping real life living in Fantasyland. It doesn't really feel like there's much gameplay, and the gameplay that is there is just sometimes a little bit easy. You know, you make your Sims get a job, but the economy is so messed up. You don't need a job to make money. There's so many like backwards ways that you can earn money in The Sims 4, even just in the base game alone, that you don't even need a job. Now, in terms of performance, The Sims 4 is definitely a buggy game. Every single Sims game, to be honest, has been buggy. I just feel like it's an issue with simulating life, especially if you play in the turbo speed modes. I would say Sims 4 Sims are pretty stupid. They are better than, you know, Sims 1, 2, and 3 Sims in many aspects. For example, they can multitask, which means they can sit down and talk at the same time, or they can eat whilst watching TV. Like, there are certain things you can do which involve multitasking, which are pretty normal. Sims are very terrible at socializing. Social events are a big no-go in The Sims 4. Any kind of event involving like 2 or more Sims, it's not happening. Whatever you want to do, you're not going to be able to do it. No social event, honestly, has ever worked perfect for me in The Sims 4. Even just socializing in general. Infants are also very, very buggy. As the latest Sims 4 life stage, which was added, you know, roughly 8 years after the initial release, they weren't implemented very well and sometimes cause issues in the household. I would generally say though, most of the Sims 4 issues come from if you install a lot of packs. If you just have the base game alone, I don't think it's going to be severely buggy and glitchy. It's more so when you add all the different packs and it just becomes a mess. That's when the game doesn't, you know, handle itself very well. Even if you have a very good computer, it's not going to run that well with multiple packs, but with the base game alone, it runs okay. The Sims 4 definitely lacks a lot of ambition and care that previous Sims games had. When you think of certain iconic Sims things, like, I don't know, burglars, many of these things just don't exist in The Sims 4. And the ones that do exist sometimes feel like an afterthought or they weren't implemented very well. The Sims 4, in my opinion, it's not really a Sims game. It's a life simulation game for sure, but it's not The Sims. It feels safe, it feels limited, yet unnecessarily complicated at the same time. It feels expensive with the countless DLC, and every time you buy a new pack, it gives you, you know, a bit of a dopamine boost for about an hour, but then you get over it. The Sims series is a very good series of life simulation games, and I would say The Sims 4 is the worst out of a good bunch. Obviously, it's the latest released Sims game, and it is basically the best life simulation game out right now in the market, but just not necessarily the best Sims game. My total score of The Sims 4 in its current state is a 7 out of 10. I think it's a solid framework for a great Sims game that lacks ambition, major features such as cars and an open world, and feels half-baked despite the numerous updates over the years. I feel like no matter how many updates the game gets over the years, they just need to start over with a new title. I did make a video once discussing the disaster of The Sims 4 and how it came to be the worst Sims game and everything that went wrong with it really from release, so make sure you check out that video if you want to know the history of that. Otherwise, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.